Carl Gustav Jung was born in Kesswil, Switzerland, on July 26, 1875. He arrived into a world still straddling tradition and modernity, a Europe where superstition and science coexisted, where industrialization was rising, but ancient spiritual practices still lingered in the countryside. His father, Paul Achilles Jung, served as a pastor in the Swiss Reformed Church, while his mother, Emilie Preiswerk, descended from a long line of theologians. Carl was not their first child. A son, Paul, had been born before him, but died shortly after birth. That loss, though predating Carl, cast a long shadow over his parents' lives, and he grew up with the sense of being both precious and precarious. Later, he would gain a younger sister, Johanna Gertrude, called Trudy, who would one day become his loyal secretary and assistant. Jung's childhood was marked not by simplicity, but by emotional turbulence. His mother, Emilie, struggled with depression and what might now be recognized as episodes of severe psychological instability. By day, she could seem kind, gentle, and maternal. By night, however, she transformed into someone unpredictable, eccentric, and haunted. She often claimed she was visited by spirits. Her frequent hospital stays left young Carl feeling abandoned, confused, and compelled to grow up far earlier than most children. Much of his upbringing was spent not solely with his parents, but also with relatives, particularly his maternal aunt, Dot. This complex environment left Jung with two powerful impressions. The first was the fragility of human sanity. Watching his mother vacillate between affection and strangeness introduced him to the idea that the mind was layered and mysterious, not a stable or singular thing. The second impression was the reality of the spiritual dimension. His mother's talk of spirits and invisible presences might have unsettled some, but for Jung it planted a lifelong curiosity. What lies beyond the rational mind? What forces, unseen yet deeply felt, shape the course of human lives? As a boy, Carl was fascinated by history, archaeology, and the grandeur of ancient civilizations. He often pored over stories of myth and legend, but alongside this curiosity came darker elements, his dreams. Many children dream, but Jung's dreams were different. They were vivid, troubling, and often filled with symbolic imagery he could not yet understand. These dreams would stay with him for decades, influencing the theories he later developed about the unconscious. Life in rural 19th century Switzerland also played its part. The countryside was dotted with small villages where Christianity blended easily with local superstition. People spoke as easily of spirits and omens as they did of scripture. For Carl, this environment only deepened the sense that reality contained hidden layers. He recalled conducting small experiments with cousins, rudimentary attempts to investigate the world around him in scientific fashion. Even then, he wondered why people did not dedicate more energy to understanding the meaning of life itself. A pivotal event occurred when Jung was 12 years old. After a quarrel with another boy, Carl was shoved to the ground and briefly lost consciousness. In that moment, an odd thought entered his mind. Perhaps this incident could excuse him from the dreaded chore of school. From then on, whenever he was faced with going to class or completing homework, he fainted. These fainting spells kept him at home for 6 months. Doctors could find no physical explanation. Eventually, Carl realized he was creating the fainting episodes himself, unconsciously, as a way of escaping a situation he disliked. When he recognized this, the fainting stopped. He would later describe this as his first real encounter with neurosis, a symptom that emerges not from the body, but from the psyche's hidden needs. Jung came to think of himself as having two personalities. One was the ordinary boy, timid, awkward, and often insecure. The other was a mature, skeptical man inside him, a figure who felt ancient, wise, and deeply interested in spiritual questions. These two selves would remain in tension throughout his life, pushing him both toward the scientific world of medicine and the mystical realm of symbols and dreams. After finishing school, Jung decided to study medicine at the University of Basel. He passed his natural sciences exam in 1896 and his anatomical and psychological exam the following year. While pursuing his degree, he worked in microscopic anatomy and later assisted in surgery at Basel's Citizens Hospital. At first, his path seemed aimed at a traditional medical career, but fate intervened when he stumbled across psychiatric writings by Richard von Krafft-Ebing. One phrase struck him: psychosis is a disease of the personality. For Jung, This sentence was like a revelation. It suggested that psychiatry was not just about disordered brains, but about the very essence of who a person is. Here, finally, was a field that combined his scientific training with his yearning to explore the mysteries of the soul. In 1900, Jung graduated with his medical degree and began working at the Burgholzli Psychiatric Hospital in Zurich, one of the most advanced institutions of its time. He quickly proved himself talented, becoming a first-level physician. In 1903, he published his dissertation on the psychology and pathology of so-called occult phenomena. That same year, he married Emma Rauschenbach, the daughter of a wealthy industrialist. Emma, though 7 years younger, proved a remarkable partner. Together they had 5 children: Agathe, Gret, Franz, Marianne, and Helene. Their marriage was unconventional. While they remained devoted to each other, both accepted extramarital relationships, including Jung's famous liaison with Tony Wolff, who later became one of his closest collaborators. Jung's career accelerated. By 1906, he had begun pioneering experiments with word association. In these studies, a researcher read words aloud, and the subject responded with the first word that came to mind. Jung carefully recorded delays, slips of the tongue, and emotional reactions. He concluded that these responses revealed hidden complexes in the unconscious, clusters of thoughts and feelings bound together by emotion. These discoveries caught the attention of Sigmund Freud in Vienna. In 1907, Jung and Freud met in person. Their first conversation lasted an astonishing 13 hours. Jung admired Freud's brilliance, his courage, and his groundbreaking ideas about the unconscious. Freud, in turn, saw in Jung a possible heir, someone who could carry psychoanalysis into the future. For several years, they corresponded intensely, exchanging letters filled with theoretical speculation. Their friendship was not just intellectual, but personal, with Freud describing Jung as his crown prince. Yet, as time passed, cracks began to appear. Freud believed that sexuality was the dominant force shaping the psyche. Jung, however, felt this was far too narrow. He saw human beings as driven not only by repressed desires, but also by spiritual needs, symbolic quests, and a longing for wholeness. In 1912, Jung published The Psychology of the Unconscious, openly challenging Freud's views. The break was painful and dramatic. Freud accused Jung of abandoning science for mysticism. Jung countered that Freud's theory reduced humanity to mere biology, ignoring the richness of myth and spirit. Their collaboration ended, and Jung struck out to build his own school of thought, analytical psychology. The years surrounding World War I were difficult for Jung. Switzerland remained neutral, but Jung served as an army doctor and later commanded an internment camp for captured soldiers. Privately, he underwent what he later called his confrontation with the unconscious. After breaking with Freud, Jung was beset by visions and voices. At times, he feared he was on the brink of madness. Instead of resisting, he chose to explore these experiences. He developed a method he called active imagination, in which he entered into dialogue with the figures and images that appeared to him. These inner explorations he recorded in journals, which later became known as the Red Book, though unpublished. During his lifetime, the Red Book is now recognized as a central text, showing how Jung wrestled with his own psyche and forged his theories from lived experience. From this crucible of personal crisis emerged some of Jung's most influential ideas. He proposed that beyond the personal unconscious, where forgotten memories and repressed emotions lie, there exists a collective unconscious. This deeper layer of the psyche contains archetypes, universal images and patterns inherited across generations. These archetypes manifest in myths, religions, and symbols shared by all cultures. Jung identified several key archetypes: the self, representing wholeness; the shadow, embodying repressed traits; the anima and animus, personifications of the feminine and masculine within each psyche; and the persona, the social mask we wear in public. For Jung, the great task of life was individuation, the process of integrating these elements into a harmonious whole. Individuation required confronting the shadow, acknowledging the anima or animus, and balancing the tension between introversion and extroversion. Dreams, he believed, played a crucial role, offering symbolic guidance toward this integration. In 1921, Jung published Psychological Types. introducing his famous distinction between introverts and extroverts, along with the four psychological functions: thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. These categories laid the groundwork for later personality tests, including the Myers-Briggs type indicator, still widely used today. Jung's curiosity was not confined to Europe. In 1909, he traveled to the United States to lecture at Clark University, where he met influential figures like William James. Later, he visited the Taos Pueblo in New Mexico, where he was deeply struck by the spirituality of Native Americans, particularly their sense of harmony with nature. In 1925, he journeyed to Africa, seeking insights into primitive psychology. While that trip disappointed him, a later visit to India profoundly affected his thinking. Hindu philosophy, especially concepts like the mandala, resonated with his ideas about the self and psychic wholeness. Jung's influence extended beyond academia. In the 1930s, he indirectly helped shape Alcoholics Anonymous. An American named Roland Hazard, struggling with alcoholism, sought Jung's treatment. Jung told him that only a profound spiritual transformation could save him. Hazard later became involved with the Oxford Group, which influenced Bill Wilson, the co-founder of AA. Jung's insight that addiction could only be overcome by a spiritual awakening became a cornerstone of the program. Yet Jung's reputation was not without controversy. In the 1930s, as fascism spread through Europe, some accused him of anti-Semitism or of sympathizing with the Nazis. Jung strongly denied this, pointing to his Jewish colleagues and patients, and later evidence suggests many of the accusations stemmed from mistranslations or distortions. Still, the shadow of that era lingered over his legacy. Despite declining health in later years, Jung continued to write prolifically. His work spanned from alchemy to flying saucers, interpreting even UFO sightings as psychological symbols of humanity's longing for unity. He held professorships at Zurich and Basel, taught generations of students, and advised countless analysts. On June 6, 1961, Carl Gustav Jung died in Switzerland at the age of 85. By then, he had become one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. His concepts, archetypes, the collective unconscious, individuation, introversion, and extroversion, had entered not only psychology, but also literature, art, religion, and popular culture. Jung believed that human beings are shaped not only by their past, but also by their future goals, by symbols older than memory, and by a timeless quest for wholeness. He saw the psyche as a living organism, striving always toward balance and meaning. To this day, Jung's ideas continue to inspire therapists, artists, and seekers of wisdom. His legacy endures because he touched something universal, the human longing to know ourselves. Perhaps it is fitting to end with his own words. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. But of course, the story of Carl Jung does not really end with his death in 1961. In many ways, his influence only began to grow after he was gone. Like the archetypes he described, Jung himself became a symbol of depth, of courage in exploring the unknown, and of the unending search for meaning. In the decades that followed, Jung's writings spread beyond psychiatry. His work seeped into literature, philosophy, art, and even cinema. Writers such as Hermann Hesse and James Joyce drew on Jungian themes, weaving the archetypal journey into their novels. Filmmakers later found in his concepts of shadow and self a way to tell stories that resonate universally, stories where characters struggle not only against the outside world, but against their own hidden depths. The world of psychology also continued to feel his presence. Analytical psychology became its own school, distinct from Freudian psychoanalysis. Jungian analysts set up institutes across Europe, North America, and beyond. They carried forward his methods of dream interpretation, active imagination, and the search for individuation. Even today, therapists trained in Jung's tradition help patients explore their inner lives through symbols, myths, and archetypal narratives. And yet, Jung's ideas did not remain confined to the therapy room. They influenced fields as diverse as religious studies, anthropology, and comparative mythology. The notion of a collective unconscious provided a framework for scholars trying to understand why myths from distant cultures often mirror each other so closely. Why do dragons appear in legends from both East and West? Why do so many societies tell stories of great floods, of dying and rising gods, of tricksters and heroes? For Jung, the answer lay in the archetypes, universal patterns of the human psyche echoing through time. Perhaps most surprising is how Jung's ideas anticipated modern discussions of spirituality. In an era when many predicted religion would fade, Jung argued that the human need for meaning, for connection to something larger than oneself, could never be extinguished. He warned that if traditional forms of spirituality collapsed, people would invent new ones, sometimes in distorted or dangerous ways. In this, Jung was almost prophetic. Today, when millions search for meaning through self-help, New Age practices, or even conspiracy theories, his insights feel strikingly relevant. His emphasis on balance also finds echoes in contemporary discussions about mental health. Jung insisted that a person cannot live by reason alone, nor by instinct or feeling alone. Wholeness, he said, comes only when the opposites within us are reconciled, when we face the shadow, honor the anima or animus, and listen to both logic and intuition. Modern psychology may use different language, but the underlying truth remains. Ignoring parts of ourselves leads to imbalance and distress, while integrating them leads to healing. Even the rise of personality typology owes something to Jung. The Myers-Briggs type indicator, one of the most widely used personality frameworks in the world, was built on his model of introversion, extroversion, and the four functions. Millions of people, in workplaces and classrooms, have used these categories to better understand themselves and others, though often in simplified form compared to Jung's original vision. Of course, Jung was not without critics. Some argued that his embrace of myth and spirituality blurred the line between science and mysticism. Others accused him of relying too heavily on subjective interpretation. Yet even these critiques testify to the breadth of his ambition. He was not content to reduce the human psyche to neurons firing or impulses repressing. He sought instead to honor the full complexities of human existence,